Traveling the Vortex.
We've joined the Doctor as he travels the Vortex and prepare to go to move 1023. It's episode 412. I'm Keith.
I'm Sean.
Cheers. The game's over. We just went to...
It's over.
So the podcast's over. So.
No, the podcast can begin because we're out of the...
Oh, we escaped. I'm Glenn then. All right,
yeah,
I got
see?
you. I thought maybe since we did the final move...
The games are over.
Oh,
we're
but
now
that doesn't end
on
the
to the
podcast.
show.
Good night, everybody.
Did you guys have a good week?
Yeah, pretty good. I mean, nothing special, but...
Do anything fun? Just get ready for Christmas?
Yeah, watched a couple more Christmas carols this week. So I knocked out Scrooged, which with the Bill Murray, the parody. Love that one. That's so fun. And then I watched another one, an animated one from 97, I think it was, that had the voice of Tim Curry as Scrooge. It had Whoopi Goldberg, not playing it funny, playing it straight, and with a British accent, as she plays the ghost of Christmas present. And Ed Asner is the voice of Marley. And it was okay. It was kind of subpar. No, I always say subpar. It was average animation. It was nothing special, nothing to write home about. I thought Tim Curry did an adequate job, but the thing is, none of them really do anything to give it something different than what Christmas Carol is. The only thing that really makes this particular version of it stand out is there's a dog. Scrooge has a dog that goes along with him on two of the occasions, and then it doesn't on the end. But
you have to watch The Man Who Invented Christmas.
yeah, that's another one that's on my list.
We watched it this week.
I sort of thought about maybe waiting till after Christmas for that one. And
Is it truly a Christmas movie?
It is truly a Christmas movie. I think it is to Dickens and A Christmas Carol what Shakespeare in Love is to Shakespeare and Romeo and Juliet.
yeah,
It's that kind of...
Yeah, that's kind of the impression you get.
It's a fictionalized account of the backstory of how this came about. But it's just a delight. It's got a lot of fun performances, and it would be a perfect capstone for you.
I'll put it on the list.
But had I seen it last year, it probably would have made my top 10 of the year list.
Oh, wow.
I really enjoyed it. It was that good.
Huh.
Cool.
And it's on Prime, so watch it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you watch anything else this week?
Something that Keith watched as well.
What I watch?
I heard that you watched Christmas Chronicles.
A while ago.
Was that a while ago?
That was a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, you even talked about
I guess
it.
you did talk about it last week. Yeah,
What did you think?
We watched it.
Christmas
that was
Chronicles.
so much fun.
Isn't it?
It's very much in the vein of the Santa Claus. There's a lot of kind of cool, newfangled prep and landing gizmos and bits and bobs about it.
How he does it, the magic.
And the Christmas story of it is just kind of there.
Yeah.
But it's Kurt Russell playing Santa, so that's really the magic of it. Those were really the two big ones that we knocked out. So
Keith?
We watched the ever festive Mamma Mia 2. Here I go again. It was okay. I did not like it as much as the first one, and I wasn't a big fan of the first one.
What a lot of people said.
It seemed like it's the B-side of the greatest hits. I knew, like, the repeated songs and then Fernando were the only songs I actually knew in it, because there were the staples you have to have if you're doing a Mamma Mia, and then they added Fernando, and it was okay. And it felt like
Somebody said there's just not enough familiar songs. Let's do a couple repeats.
Yeah.
Did you watch anything else?
No. Once Upon a Sesame Street Christmas.
Yes,
We did watch it. We didn't watch the Sesame Street Christmas Carol, but it's cute. It's Elmo's dad telling Elmo's story of...
it's Elmo's dad? You said that lazily enough that I thought you said Elmo's dead and he's telling a Christmas story. What?
Elmo's dad is telling Elmo a Christmas story of how Christmas came to Sesame Street.
I see.
I have this little image of Elmo with a halo and wings and a harp, and I'm getting teared up now.
Starts out like American Beauty. I'm dead.
That'd be a great parody. One of the movie parodies.
Should we discuss the gifts that we got each other?
Oh, we could talk about that. Absolutely.
We did open our Christmas gifts ahead of recording, And Glenn got me the awesome game Codenames that I can't wait to play. It sounds like it's a lot of fun.
Glenn got me the awesome game Choose Your Own Adventure, House of Danger, based on the book by R.A. Montgomery, which is a cooperative adventure game by Prosper Hall, which is, if you've ever read one of the old Choose Your Own Adventure books, it's apparently that, but in
they were
game
huge
form.
in the late 70s and early 80s.
So I can't wait to play that.
Great. Keith got me a couple of figurines, Mickey figurines. They're a Funko line, Mickey True Original, and actually they probably are coincide with the it says on the side 90 years, 90th anniversary, and one of them is the conductor Mickey from the band concert, and then the other one is, which is actually one of my favorite versions of Mickey, and the other one is the Musketeer Mickey from Three Musketeers. So those were very cool.
And then Keith got me a Die Hard Christmas illustrated holiday classic, which is a little a children.
It's a children's style book. It's
Children's
very
book,
clever.
yeah.
And we are going to read this tomorrow night with the kids.
Does
so
it say yippee ki yay? And I would bleep this part here, but I will just be lazy and not say it.
You're going to have to edit out the silence anyways.
I don't know. This is Happy Trails. This is Sean's.
Sean got me a gift card and a tin of popcorn.
Where's the gift card to?
Barnes & Noble.
All right. Because when I walk out of it later, I want to know where I'm going to spend it.
Hey!
No!
And then a belated birthday gift of a Amazon gift card.
Yes. And then Sean got me a really, really cool print by an artist of a Dalek, and it's kind of it's one of those cool, almost, I think it's pen and watercolor. Probably that's watercolor.
Yeah, looks like
watercolor base, and it's very, very cool, very sweet. So Merry Christmas, guys!
Merry Christmas.
All right, should we move on to news now?
Well, let's move on to
All
news. It's kind of a slow news week as we wait for Resolution to air, but Big Finish never fails to come through with some news. They have announced that Torchwood's Captain John Hart is returning to his role in a box set called The Sins of Captain John.
Sounds interesting.
So it's a whole box set just about Captain John. It looks like it's on the heels and written by the guy who did The Death of Captain Jack.
Kind of a companion piece.
Yeah.
Do you think Big Finish sits around and the weeks that they don't have something releasing are the weeks that they decide that they need to talk about something releasing? Because it sure seems like we get a lot of Big Finish news.
Yeah. And so this is also, of course, him coming back to Big Finish because he did have a role in The Death of Captain Jack, the box set. So he's back with his own box set now. Everyone gets a box set.
You get a box set, and you get a box set, and you get a box set. Very cool.
Yeah.
What else?
We have some news.
We have some news.
Sean, you want to take this?
No.
We are starting in collaboration with Sci-Fi For Me, a video podcast called TARDIS Sauce. It will debut on their YouTube channel January 9th, something along those lines.
10th, isn't it? Maybe it is
9th or 10th.
I don't know. We have the press release here. We can just look at
I
it.
should pull up the press release, shouldn't I?
It's news to me.
It will
Mine
air
sounds
bi-weekly.
right. Yeah. So every other week, starting
Yes.
in January. And we'll actually have some really cool topics to talk about. It'll be we look at it as kind of an extension of this show. It's something that we kind of do here, but it'll be a video. You'll be able to find it on YouTube and Twitch, and then if things work out right, we might have some local television coverage as well. So
Wednesdays at 7 p.m. is when
I
it's
knew it was
supposed to
Wednesdays.
drop.
That's why I was thinking this night sounded strange because isn't Sunday the 7th?
For those of you
Wednesday the 9th.
Okay.
if you just don't get enough of us as is, now you'll be able to double dip.
Well, and we'll be joined by Tim Harvey from
Yes, from
Sci-Fi For Me, one of the anchors there. He's
And
gonna help moderate us.
He is a big.
Good luck to him.
Yeah, he's a big Doctor Who fan, so he's been for a long time.
Yeah.
You realize we're going to have to step up our game. I mean,
We will.
well, if he's a big Doctor Who fan, he probably knows what he's talking about versus us. And
Well, you're the only one here that doesn't know what he's talking about. So.
I'm going to have to step up my game.
Plus, it's a video podcast, so we got to actually, look presentable.
Yeah,
now.
we can't come in our pajamas.
It's gonna be
and
the
our-
biggest. Well, it's gonna only be chest
We'll
up.
have to comb our hair. We'll have to comb our hair.
Trim the facial hair.
Speak for yourself. I'm planning on showing up in my pajamas.
Make sure they're TARDIS pajamas.
Looking
There you go.
Looking like I just rolled out of bed. I'm here.
Hopefully, this venue will allow
I didn't
us.
brush my teeth.
Hopefully, the venue will allow us to do some different things than we normally get to.
Absolutely.
Really get to show some of the things we've only been able to describe, or conventions that we go to from here on out. We can, provide some additional coverage to and whatnot.
Absolutely.
Looking forward to it.
It'll be a lot of fun. So be watching for that, and of course we'll keep reminding you where you can find it.
And if you're not already, go to Facebook and like the Sci-Fi for Me page.
And make sure you subscribe to them on YouTube so you can find the video cast when it comes out.
Speaking of likes, and we did thank people on Facebook, but again, thank you for putting us over 500 likes over the weekend. That was actually last week, or late last week. That was actually Sean made a push and got us up there, and we've made that goal. So we'll set another goal in the future and try to get even further. So
yeah, absolutely.
Very cool. Anything else?
That's it for news.
How about feedback? Do we have anybody this week?
Nothing this week.
Nobody this week. Well, I suppose then we can move on to our rousing review of the Toymaker.
Celestial Toymaker.
That's just the Toymaker.
Just the Toymaker?
That
that was not one of the episode titles.
Well,
so
Sean said it was a Christmas story, right? So
he made
somewhere
toys, right?
Outside space and time, there waits the Celestial Toymaker, an enigmatic being who ensnares unwary travelers into his domain to play out his dark and deadly games.
Until the end of that, it almost sounds like they're describing Santa Claus. And then it becomes kind of more of a Krampus thing.
Right. Separated from the security of the TARDIS, the Doctor is forced to play a complex trilogic game with the evil magician. Meanwhile, Dodo and Steven must enter into a series of tests with, among others, the schoolboy Cyril and the King and Queen of Hearts. If they lose, they are condemned to become the Toymaker's playthings for all eternity. For the malevolent wonderland that is the Celestial Toy Room, nothing is just for fun.
I thought you were going to dig the horn out there, Sean.
Oh, man, was I tempted. But 'tis the season to be jolly and merry. So instead, I'll just stay silent.
I enjoyed it.
Really?
I had a lot of fun with it.
Oh, what'd you like about it?
I
a
like
little bit about what you like.
Sell me on it.
It had a very Alice in Wonderland feel to it to me. And it felt like Doctor Who kind of doing Alice in Wonderland into this abstract, weird society that this all-powerful being has created. And that's what he enjoys, is making people play games and then keeping them as toys. Okay, it's basic. It's got a simple plot, but the mechanics I enjoyed. Even for the most part, the execution, from what I could tell from most of the telesnaps, I was okay with. I liked the pacing of it and how each episode had its own game that they had to play, and some of them were even split in two beyond that. I liked how they dealt with the Doctor being on holiday. I thought they did a good job of making him there but not actually there by taking his voice away and making him still play the game, so he was still a presence. Yeah, and it also gave me kind of the feel of the Mind Robber, which
I
of
was
course
about
I like
to
a lot
say
too.
I completely expected that from Key,
Yeah.
who's one of his favorite stories.
So the fact that they went
Mind
to the
Robber.
kind of weird abstract and in the 60s.
This is a few years before the Mind Robber.
Yeah, oh yeah. So that's some of the reasons I liked it. I didn't like the clowns. I'll say that.
Glenn, what did you think?
I'm real middle of the road on this one. I don't think this is certainly not one of my favorite stories, but for all the things that Keith said are things that I like. I appreciated that in the 1960s, probably around 62, 63, 64, 64, 65, this is what they did. And I appreciate the fact that they did choose some abstract ideas to do on television, on Doctor Who.
It feels very bold.
Yeah. it also strikes a humorous tone at times, and I think that is kind of a neat little foil to the fact that this is basically the Hunger Games for Steven and Dodo. I mean, they have to escape with their lives because they can either get out or die. When the Celestial Toymaker puts it forth that they're going to play these games or stay there forever, that's mostly applied to the Doctor. He wants the Doctor to lose his game so that he can stay and continue to play games with the Doctor. But every time that the Doctor's never in any peril. He's just moving things around the board.
Oh, right,
His
yeah.
peril is he is stuck there. Theirs, every time they move to a new game, it's survival. They are going to die if they do it wrong. And so I really kind of appreciated the fact that there's a counterbalance to what's happening there with the Doctor, especially, and I agree. I thought it was relatively clever, although blatantly obvious that he was on vacation or on holiday, rather, that they did that especially. And I forgot to look this up, but before he loses the voice, I thought the first time, this is my second time through on this. I watched this a few years back, especially when I was reading Neil and Sue Perriman doing their book series. And when I first saw this, I was certain that he just recorded some lines before he left. This time when I listened to it, when the episode starts and he still has his voice before the Toymaker, that sounds like a completely different actor trying to do Hartnell. And so I wondered if maybe that was even recorded by somebody and they decided, okay, that's enough. Now we'll pull the voice away so we don't have to have this really bad impersonation. But I appreciate what they did there. And then I like back to the comedy element of it, I do like the characters that are brought on board. And I didn't think of this until Keith brought it up, the fact that it does feel a little Alice in Wonderland.
I can't really put my finger on.
Well, certainly the playing card,
the playing card aspect of it.
Does.
But I even thought
but
that
more
before
so
in the first issue, the first part.
There's
I
a
thought
bit
that.
of surrealness, the kind of the Cheshire Cat or Tweedledee and Tweedledum kind of playing with Alice.
Well, especially when Cyril comes along later, he very much looks like Tweedledee or Tweedledum.
Yeah, he most definitely does. But he, like, even the clowns having just offsetting.
I think
our
what
heroes.
it is Alice in Wonderland is so much these are friendly faces, but there's evil lurking beneath them. Kind of, there's malice behind a lot of what they do, or it's not necessarily niceness. They're not always looking out for your best interest in Wonderland.
Yep.
And this is very much that same way. I think that is part of why I see the connection.
I would agree with that. I quite enjoyed Michael Gow, although he doesn't do a lot.
He really
but
doesn't.
He very charismatic in this role, and I think he embodies that role really well. I think the other thing is, the first time I went through this, I struggled with it because I sort of knew the plot peripherally from reading things online. But I struggled to follow exactly what was going on. And, of course, the first 3 episodes of this story are missing. So we relied on reconstructions. And I watched the exact same reconstructions last time. And I just had a little bit of trouble following along. This time was very helpful, having read the book first and then going back and watching it. It flowed with me a little better. Nothing really seemed missing the first time that I did. Well, obviously, but the moving pictures. But nothing seemed missing, but there was just little elements of it that I just wasn't quite getting. And so this time, having read it, been a little more thorough with it, watching it, it seemed I kind of was able to absorb it a little more. And maybe because it was also my second viewing, too.
And that could also be part of why I enjoyed it so much, was I read the entire novelization before I watched any of the reconstructions. Yeah. And that just seems to work out so well, too. So I knew what I was kind of expecting, and I think Jerry Davis did such a good job novelizing it that it helped me enjoy it. And any parts of the actual episode that might be a little lacking, I was able to fill in mentally without even trying.
Well, the interesting thing about it is I've read the foreword, and he talked about how, it was quickly written because he had to go home and write this thing, basically, because they had lost this screenwriter that they had originally and the concepts that they had for this story. And they couldn't use it suddenly. And so he had to rewrite it and do something different with it. And I appreciated the fact that he was able to do that in a crux. But obviously it didn't work for you, Sean. But But then he also mentioned that, how long it took them to novelize the book, because this is like, 101 in the target range. So this is way down the road. And he said, he makes a comment in the foreword about being able to add a few things to it that weren't in the story. And I thought, well, this will be real interesting, because even though I missed a lot of chunk of things that were going on watching the reconstructions, this will be neat to kind of embellish it. And I felt like it was almost
I think the main part that
word.
he was able to add was, I felt like the novelization had more about the actual Toymaker and kind of his species and his history than the actual episode did. Like, it talks about how
more than I did.
I remember this. I was kind of surprised that the episode just kind of says, well, he's immortal and he can rebuild whatever he does.
Yeah.
But it never gives an implication that he's a whole species. He's a part of a bigger species, and the book does.
The episode almost could play it off as Renegade Time Lord.
Yeah,
you could,
absolutely.
you could make an argument that there's enough ambiguity about it that because of his familiarity with the Doctor and the fact that they have crossed paths before,
and especially with our
adventure.
Forward knowledge of Omega,
Right.
The fact that he could build universes, this could easily just be another Time
So that's
Lord.
funny. I didn't get that at all. But I also had Immortals in my head when we were talking about, what's the Fifth Doctor story when they're
The
talking
Eternals.
the Eternals. Yeah.
Yeah.
So immediately,
That's
now
what
I had the retroactive ability to retcon this back.
Right.
When I first saw this, my first thought was, oh, he's one of the Eternals,
And that's kind of
He
what the
fits
book
into that
implies
category.
to more.
Yeah.
I think it talks about it more than the actual story does.
Right. So the book didn't give me the impression that there was a species. It was almost the same man reincarnated each time. This is the way
I just got the
understood
impression
it.
there was more than just him.
I think he did say toy makers, but also I got the impression it was just him every time that he sort of comes back. But maybe I
Well, he talked about
maybe I
how
cross pollinated that because they were so non-specific, and in the TV versions of this, that maybe I just cross pollinated that and thought, oh, it's because I've had some foreknowledge of knowing what happens at the end of the story, having watched it once
Right.
before. Maybe that's why I thought, well, he just keeps coming back.
at least in the book, the Doctor talks about how it won't destroy the Toymaker. He'll just have to rebuild his universe.
Right.
So it
think that's
wouldn't
where
even
I got
necessarily
the-
be reincarnation. It's just he
yeah.
just continues on more than anything.
Yeah. I had a couple of issues with it, but let's Sean talk a little bit about it, and I'll come back to some of the nitpicks I had with it.
Sticking with the positive first, I don't disagree with you guys on some of the things you brought up. The fact that this is a replacement story, okay, there are allowances that have to be made for that. The fact that it was written in a hurry, the fact that we're dealing with a bunch of actors who were brought in to play certain roles and then given a new script and said, we're going to put you in a clown costume. Is that all right? And they rolled with it. Okay, that's kind of clever. The fact that it is such a quick turnaround and that it is so abstract for something that was put together so quickly, I can give it a credit for all that. I think there's a lot of really nifty ideas surrounding the Toymaker, and the fact that he, it's almost an old sci-fi trope with the idea of an all-powerful being ensnaring lesser beings to be playthings.
Yeah, it's a common idea.
I mean, Star Trek has done it, and G.I. Joe's done it. I mean, there's a ton of them out there, but to do it in this manner, I think is kind of a unique thing. But then to give the Doctor that personal knowledge, I thought was kind of an interesting. Oh, all right, this is kind of a cool a way of developing that a little bit more. I wish we'd gotten more of it.
Well,
That to me was the story, less of the jumping through hoops and crawling over chasms and the physicality of it. And I'm sorry, the Trilogic game. In this instance, less is more, and I feel like calling it the Trilogic game is enough. That was enough for me. Seeing the Doctor move blocks around and not explaining it, I would have just been okay with. The minute you set down the rules of, well, you have to move the pieces and you have to move them over here and you can't put a smaller... You know what? I've played that game. I know exactly what game that is. I was 3, and I was pretty good at it. I don't feel like this is not a big test of the Doctor's, It's like the two guys in the two. One of these buttons will lead to certain death, and one of these buttons will, and you get the one question that they tell the truth, and it's that puzzle. It's like we've all seen Labyrinth at this point. We know how to get out of this one.
That's not even originally from Labyrinth.
Yeah,
right.
But you know what I mean. It's you're pulling upon such old school stuff that it was kind of like, oh, you're gonna test the Doctor's mind with this, quote unquote logic game that is so. I mean, that's like when she's chess. Why don't you play chess with him? I just felt like that kind of robbed all of the.
But the Trilogic game really had nothing to do with the Doctor's test, though. Ultimately,
yeah, it was just
I
keeping
think
him busy.
That's what I
Yeah.
liked about it. Is it was more of a distraction than it was anything else.
But I felt like there would have been a bit more suspense and intrigue, at least on my end, wondering what was going on versus, oh, for Pete's sake, Doctor.
Well, but I
hurry
think
up
that's
and get to
that's the thing
Well,
is
but that's part of the thing.
That's
He
why
he needed to make sure he didn't finish it before Steven and Dodo.
yeah.
So he couldn't just rush
and
through
that's
it
why
either.
all of the suspense is put in the hands of the companions this time, and I think that worked, especially since we knew that Hartnell was gone. So.
Half the time, this Toymaker sped it up just to speed it up. You know?
I agree that Michael Gow is a very magnetic and compelling presence. And it's funny because as somebody who knows Michael Gow primarily as Alfred the Butler,
From the '89 Batman,
from the '89
Right.
Batman and on films, to see him as this very debonair young man, I was like, oh, wow, all right. So that was the thing. I've never seen any of the Hammer horror films that he was a star of. So that was a difference. But for all of the things that
So he is a guardian, according to the TARDIS wiki.
really.
Yeah, one of the guardians of time.
Well, and then that's probably divulged later because he's in Big Finish, he's in some prose stories,
Right.
he's in things like that.
So for all the things that you could kind of put in the plus column, then I kind of fall back on the negatives, which for me included the Trilogic game. The pacing I felt was wildly off. It helped, as you said, Keith, with having read the book. Thank God that I read the book because I knew what I was getting into. But then sitting down and actually, seeing it play out, it was just like, I really had a hard time staying awake through this recon, which recons tend to be more difficult for me than most. But this one was really, really rough. The pacing was just unbearable. Which is weird considering that, we've got this game, we've got this feat of daring that Steven and Dodo are fighting for their lives, and I couldn't be bothered to care. It was yeah. I felt Dodo was pretty much
Dodo's Dodo here, though.
Yeah.
I mean, she's the same Dodo that we get in the next story, which is the Gunfighters. It's the same Dodo that we
fair
got
to the
in the
story-
previous story, the Ark in Space.
There were a couple of times
the Ark.
I thought, I'm not sure what story's next. I'm not sure I know which episode Steven leaves in. Maybe he slips and falls and dies. I don't think he dies, but maybe he slips and falls and becomes a toy of the Toymaker. There was some of the suspense that actually worked for me.
No. Yeah, I mean, we've kind of... Dodo's kind of an enigma in and of herself as far as the strong companions and the mold. She's not part of that. And it's unfortunate because I think they maybe could have done something with Dodo, but pretty much from the get-go, they didn't.
No,
and then
absolutely.
everybody kind of followed suit with that, and it's no wonder that, I mean, she's only in 5 stories, maybe. I mean, it's maybe a season worth of stuff.
I don't think it's a season.
I thought I enjoyed her more in this story than previous ones. Of course, the previous ones would be the 3 others that we've seen. So
Yeah.
Well, she was in the Ark of the Gunfighters. She was in the beginning of the War Games.
Part of the war.
Yeah.
No.
Not War Games.
Machines.
War Machines.
Yeah, she's at the end of the War Machines.
No, she's at the beginning of the War Machines.
Does she leave in the War Machines?
She leaves in the War Machines.
Oh, that's right. They pick up Polly in the War Machines.
And
You're right.
Polly says, Dodo says bye, and they take off. And we don't even see
So
her. She doesn't even get a departure.
She doesn't even get a departure.
Right. So it's just the massacre of St. Bartholomew's Eve and
She's
the
not in that.
savages.
She's not in that.
Well,
She's not in Massacre.
She must show up at the end or something because she's credited.
Well, she might. That's when she might enter the TARDIS. But that her first story is the Ark. In the Ark is her first story. We've seen that. So
yeah.
And they must recap that because I remember her showing up at the beginning of that one. So that must be a recap.
That must be.
Yeah, she was barely. If she was in the Massacre, she was barely in the Massacre. So. Now there's another chaplet in the Massacre, I believe. Yes. In fact, when we get to that, there's a terrific headcanon that Jessica, I guess it's Shapansky now, Ensign does. Erica Ensign does about her lineage and how Dodo might be related to another character. But I will get there. That's another date. I loved it. It was so wonderful when she expounded on it.
So yeah, it just. It didn't. It was boring.
Yeah.
I don't understand. I think what, in and of itself, it wouldn't bother me as much as it does if it wasn't for the fact that this has kind of been regarded as this classic episode. I mean, there's been, the Celestial Toymaker. I mean, it was this lost, Holy Grail.
I don't know
kind
which
of
message
thing.
boards you've been reading, but no, this has always been a clunker stinker in most of the.
Really? Because I remember it kind of being a golden chalice. We found the gold.
It is not a golden chalice episode.
And then
this one is often bantered about in discussions because of some of the obviously the Mandarin dress of Michael Gow.
There's
also the use of the N-word, although very low and briefly in by the king in the one story. There are a lot of little things that this is poked fun of or brought down as this is not a good story because of these things.
Those were the things that it went from being I don't understand why people regarded this as a classic episode to meh. Factoring those things in, it went from meh to no, I really don't like this episode. And the Mandarin dress, I don't, I like to dress comfy when I'm at home. I shuffle around without my shoes on, and okay, I'm not the dude's wearing a kimono or whatever. I don't have a problem with that. Not a big deal.
The other thing
all
you
of a
have
sudden,
to
you start to listen when you get to the last episode and you hear his speech patterns and how he's delivering the lines.
I didn't feel like he was. I never felt that he was putting an ethnic spin on it. And the other thing that I don't feel that they did is they didn't put him in yellow face for lack of a better term.
Right.
He's not exuding the character of a Asian or Chinaman at any time for me.
I mean, it's not Talon's bad.
Which was quite shocking the first time that I watched it because I had heard so much about people critiquing this story because of the fact that he's the Mandarin. He's in a Mandarin dress, and I kept thinking, oh, okay, here we go. Here goes the deep, dark, racist Doctor Who of the past. And then watching it, I kind of thought, okay, well, maybe I see some grievances, but I don't see the detriments to it that people are really maybe forcing upon it. So I give them that. The use of the N-word, that was, while part of a nursery rhyme. You guys did catch it, right?
I didn't, actually.
So it's when he's choosing chairs, and he does the old rhyme.
Oh.
And we've changed it to catch a tiger by its toe. He actually uses the N-word, and it's very brief, and he's just doing it kind of under his breath. And if you blink your ears once, you may not hear it. I only have heard it twice that I've seen it because I was called attention to it, reading it peripherally before. So, and it's excised from the book, obviously, because the book wasn't written until the 1980s. But so that's why it's almost more infamous than famous as far as
I didn't know that was in there. I had not read up on it ahead of time, and then to hear it, I did hear it, and was kind of beyond shocked because yes, it's a nursery rhyme, and yes, it's you have to kind of put the whole, okay, once again, we're dealing with something that was a product of its time, and
This was 66.
There's this whole argument that can be made around that. But specifically with what we're dealing with here, that version of the nursery rhyme is an Americanized version of it. It's not something that was widely used outside of America. And when did we figure out specifically when this episode came out?
66.
66. By 66, it was inappropriate in America. Therefore, it was inappropriate anywhere else. So the use of it in a script that aired on BBC, I found to be just not only shocking, but very inappropriate. There's nothing that I feel
How
like
much of it do you wonder is the actor was told, okay, or it's in the script, the actor...
I don't think it's in the script.
Does
it
feels
like an improv to me.
And he just adds it, and they don't have time to fix it.
Yeah.
Or they didn't catch it.
Yeah, it was enough.
Maybe. I mean, it's certainly possible. It very much is not something that should have been there. And if they didn't catch it, it snuck through, then I guess, there's nothing you can do about it. But, yeah, it pulled me right out of the proceedings at that point, and everything kind of ground to a halt, and it was very much did I just hear that? Because it's just, yeah. And, I know we've had some things specifically with Hartnell before that we've kind of had to try and make allowances for, justify, and things like that. And like this one, I couldn't do this one.
I always think of that era when those things happen. It's explanation, but not excuse. It's not excused.
Yeah.
So you have to put it in that perspective that, here's the explanation for why it was, but it's never excused that it was, in my opinion. It's never okay.
How did you guys sit down to watch the recons? Did you try to watch them all at once?
I didn't sit down. I laid on the couch with my laptop on my stomach and watched them straight through.
All four of them?
Both times, actually, yeah.
Sean?
I did mine straight through, but with several breaks.
I wonder if that's why I didn't struggle as much with the recons, was I split them up between several days.
Probably, and that's probably a way that I probably need to start tackling them, is after I've digested the book, do one episode, and then step away from it, and then come back and do one more, just because doing them in that fashion, I have to get it. I have to get it through my head that, I know this is the way the show was released, but I've always watched it in story mode. I've always consumed it in omnibus format, if you will. So it's just something that I have to, reevaluate how I do it.
I think touching on one of the issues that I had with it is, and especially this time reading the book, it didn't happen when I watched it the first time, is something in the book it almost implies as though these people were once humans.
Yeah.
And they're trapped here.
Yep.
And that almost was unsettling to me, that even though Stephen's convinced that they're not, they're just products of the Toy Keeper's mind. And Dodo is she's much more sympathetic because she sees the human nature of what's happening with them. They make mistakes. They do, they do some silly things. They have a bit of a free will to them. The book really it implied enough for me that they weren't just concoctions of the Toymaker's mind, that maybe they had come there and been trapped, and the only way that they can get out is by winning the game.
Well, and
it almost makes
the playing card almost says something similar to that too.
Yeah, it almost makes it to the point where I feel torn to the fact that, well, our companions are so glad to get out of there. The doctor should have sort of known that. It just made me want the doctor to have found a better resolution to get everybody out of there, rather than just get out of there on the skin of their teeth. And it also makes...
That's also the MO of the first doctor, though, too. He doesn't always try to
it certainly
see
does,
beyond
but it just,
his hardest crew.
But I really kind of... It implied almost a little too much that to heck with all the rest of you, we're getting out of here.
Well, the doctor has a line early, too, when he mentions this astronaut, I imagine was somebody who got stuck and couldn't solve your game or whatever. And the toy maker smiles and says, perhaps, and takes it away from him and puts it back on the shelf. And it's like, so that's a guy. Well, that's some guy that got stuck here.
It's very heavily implied that that's what's going to happen to Dodo and Steven.
Yeah,
well, not
because at the
implied,
very end,
straight
he
out
has
says
two
he's
chairs
going to
for
have
them.
chairs for him in the dollhouse.
So the thing is, though, that and then watching the television version of this, I recognize that it's not as implied as heavily. There is still some of those mentions that you pick up on, but it's just not implied as heavily. And in fact, you're almost convinced by Steven that he's right, that these are just concoctions of his mind. So it's just, that was one of the things that I had a bit of an issue with. My other problem with this, and this goes back to your wanting more of the backstory of their first meeting, is the doctor shows up. It's familiar trappings. It's familiar setting. He says there's all something very familiar with this. Implies to me that the doctor has entered the toy maker's world. That would have been the only way he'd have encountered him, right?
Yeah.
How'd he get out the first time without destroying the world?
Yeah,
that's what I want to know.
Well, the toy maker says when they initially sit down, he says, you left so quickly last time. We didn't get a chance to...
So they didn't initiate a game, and that's why
I'm
he got
assuming
away?
he didn't get out of the TARDIS last time.
But suddenly the toy maker was smart enough to keep the TARDIS there.
Figured out a way to trick him to stay.
All right. Well, and the reason I bring that up is because, and I have forgotten how this works. I do a little bit. The Eighth Doctor encounters him later in a series of comics called Endgame, which is actually very terrific. I really enjoy it. And I won't spoil anything for you but there are a few other encounters that I have read and familiar with where the Doctor was able to escape without having to go all the way through a game or something. So that was one of the things that kind of in the back of my mind, I thought this is a bit inconsistent if it's not explained, but you're right. He does tell him that you did leave too soon last time. So
one thing that I found a little frustrating was actually Steven. I know one of his traits, especially since after watching Dalek's Master Plan, is his bullheadedness and his just wanting to run forward, and but throughout some of this he just felt so aggressive and so angry that I didn't enjoy him as much as a character.
I think that Dodo's character contrasts him well enough, though, that to me it strikes a balance in the character.
It does,
because she does.
And I think that's part of why I probably enjoyed Dodo a little bit more, because
she does have some compassion and takes some different tactics.
Yeah.
And all through that, she's very much, well, we have to play fair. We have to play fair. We have to play fair. Almost to her detriment, in my opinion. But
yeah, that was just one of my complaints of it, was he was almost too aggressive.
I kind of go back and forth with Steven. There are times where I appreciate the almost simplistic nature of his bullheadedness and his straightforwardness and that man of action style of getting things done. And then there are other times where I agree with you. It's like, oh God, Steven, come on. You just
stop and think for a second
because it winds up putting him so much at odds with the Doctor or with whoever their traveling companion at the moment happens to be. And with Dodo, because she tends to be such a wallflower pushover non-entity for so many of her stories, in a way that almost makes it worse. I don't know that it's such a counterbalance as it is that they're striving for that counterbalance, but that almost causes the aggressive nature of Steven to ramp up even more, and it becomes almost more prominent, it feels like.
I would agree. One of my other issues with this, and again, it's very minor to the story, I think, but in the first game with the clowns, they're very quick to point out, well, you're cheating, you can't do that. You're cheating, you can't do that. You're cheating, you can't do that. We get into the next one, and Steven's already ready to say, well, we're not going to tell him about the two dolls.
They can cheat, we can cheat.
Yeah, well, yeah, and it's just, it felt very, in that whole bullheadedness, aggressiveness, and that was a little unsettling to me, that you guys are willing to cheat as well. Now, it is a life and death, we get the impression, life and death situation in many instances, but I had a problem with that. But then I also started to overanalyze it again, and I looked back and realized they didn't win any of those games. their opponents were always beat by themselves.
That's
In
true.
the first story, they're caught with the blindfold. That's the cheap blindfold, and so he has to go through it again, and he ends up to do his own demise. In the next room, it's the just the fact that they were able to get Dodo out of the freezing chair, because ultimately in the name of the game is you sit down, you pick the wrong chair, you lose.
Right.
And they're just lucky enough to, by sheer will, to get her out of that chair to allow for the Queen and the King to sit down together and end up, being crushed or squished or whatever was happening to that chair. And so that was their own demise. And then you could probably count the kitchen room, if you're going to count that as a game. It was hunting the thimble or hunting the key, as they changed it.
Yeah.
And then the only reason they figure out about the pie is because Mrs. What's-Her-Name almost telegraphs it, and that's when Dodo catches on and goes, "Oh, it's in the pie. We haven't checked there."
It's
because she's very defensive about that pie. Don't get near that pie.
That game isn't so much against the other people. It's more of a on your own. There's no you are your only winner.
It certainly is,
way.
And nobody else was looking
no
for
actual
that
competition
key for themselves.
Right.
But in that situation, it's even still they gave it to Dodo, and then the key. And then in that last one, Cyril ends up setting himself up for failure and ends up dying. So nowhere did they, on their own laurels or own merit, win any of those games. And that, I thought, looking back on that, I thought, well, that's kind of frustrating, because in theory, you've lost this whole thing. Ultimately, every time you just lucked into getting through it. So I kept thinking, well, the toy makers sure praising them for a lot more of not doing than they did.
Yeah, he very easily could have had a "you stole fizzy lifting drinks" moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, but again, those were minor enough things that on my third iteration of this story, once watching it through, once reading it, and then watching it again, I'm starting to pick up on those things. I'm getting a little more critical of it, but. Overall, again, to me, it's a middle of the road story. It's interesting that we land on that. You liked it. I was it's okay, and you didn't particularly like it.
I didn't particularly
that
like
rarely happens in our situation. It's
true.
never very balanced like that.
And to be fair, also, some of my enjoyment of it is how much just I enjoy the 60s Doctor Who at this point. There's just something about it, even with Hartnell's era, that I don't know if I can just put myself in such a kid mindset while watching it that I just don't have any issues with it or don't find them boring, or how I'm starting to split them up of how I view them. But I'm really enjoying the 60s era now.
Yeah, wait till we do the massacre.
See,
And I thought I'd feel that way with Dalek's Master Plan because it is so long. I thought I would be frustrated and kind of bored by it, but I still enjoyed it. So
that's actually...
But we forced you to break that one up.
Well, that's true. But I still would have. I still could have not broken up what we did in chunks, anyways, and I still broke that up as I did it.
I'm envious, honestly, of you being able to look at this era that way. I've for as long as we've been doing this, for as long as I've been a Doctor Who fan and gone back to the Hartnell era, there are always things that I can pull out of a Hartnell episode and go, well, that was cool. But frequently it's difficult. There are very, very few Hartnell episodes that I watch just because I enjoy them. Mm. There are many, many more of them that I watch because it's homework, or it's something that, well, I need to watch it because I'm trying to work my way through the series or see all of them or whatnot, and then go, I got to watch a Hartnell. And it's more often than not, it feels like a chore. And so the fact that you can do that, I'm really quite envious of that.
And I think some of it is just the amazement of what they were able to pull off in the 60s with such a small budget. Even though at this point their budget was probably fairly large in comparison to other shows or what it was previously.
I loved the dollhouse set. I thought that
the
was
dollhouse set
really
was great.
Neat.
I even liked
the kitchen was even good for as simple but also as eloquent as it was.
Yeah, I really liked all the sets. The first one, the Snakes and Ladders, was the only one I felt a little disappointed by, based off my imagination. But everything else lived up to what I imagined.
A bit more kids' obstacle course.
Yeah. And even if they hadn't have used the word Snakes and Ladders, I would have I probably would have imagined something more like what we actually showed, but because the book described it like a live-action Snakes and Ladders game, it was completely not what I imagined.
Right. Well, and then the other thing I think that is unfortunate is when they get to the last room. I had forgotten what the room looked like. I remember they had to jump from tile to tile in a board game. But when it described the pinball machine room looking like a pinball machine, I thought, oh, I don't remember what that looked like. I'll really pay attention this time and see what it looks like. And it's just a dark room with
It's
a
just
hole and arrows on the floor.
Right.
And I was like, okay, well, obviously,
like a normal board.
Jerry sort of embellished that for the book a bit. This is what we wanted. This is what we got.
As written, there was some neon and there was some flashing lights and a big bell, and we actually built a bumper, and then we went to the prop department. And they said, no, you don't get any of that. You get an error on the floor. We went, oh, okay.
Here's an interesting thing about this: is the first time I watched, no big deal. And then when I read it, I was like, well, why isn't this robot in it? That would have been cool to be able to see the robot with the display in its chest and it showing. Yeah, I went back and watched it. How did I miss this mechanical looking robot? It was a toy, looked like a toy robot, similar to the one we used in the short film we did. And I was like, how did I miss this? I have no memory of that robot being the Recon the first time. No memory whatsoever. And I was sitting there reading that book going, wow, that would have been cool. That the robot's neat. This must be what they added for the book. I go back and I'm like, wait a minute. No, the robot's here. How did I block that out of my head? Anyway, I thought that was kind of funny.
Because at this point, there's so many robots that it's like, well,
yeah.
Everybody needs a robot sidekick.
Anything else on this one you guys want to touch on? I'm really glad that we're doing the target novelizations as we do the recons.
Yeah,
because
me too.
I have found that's just that spoonful of sugar I need now, because I've gone back and watched a lot of the recons, and there's some that I've struggled on, and we've talked in the past where I've most often preferred to use the linking narration audios because they're so much easier on me. But going back after having read the books now, it's just the recons are so much better. So.
Oh, yeah. And I like this version better than sitting down with the script while watching it or something like that, or just trying to read the script. I like the novelization because it also just adds some fleshing out sometimes that
Absolutely.
I like. And it's fun to compare the novelization to what actually aired.
Yeah, what they've added, what they've embellished, what they've pulled out. So
it was no crusade, but...
See, and so far, all the recons we've done, there's not been one that I'm like, oh, that was so hard to get through.
Cool. What do we got coming up on the schedule, Sean?
Well, coming up on the schedule, my goodness, next week is New Year's, isn't it?
It sure is.
Well, that means we're going to have a whole show that is around our New Year's New Who. What did you say the name of it was? Resolution. Of the... No? Just...
That comes out Tuesday of next week, right?
Yes. On the 1st.
So be aware that this episode, the next week's episode, probably will be late to the feeds. So.
Yes.
Yeah. Consequently, because our subject material doesn't drop until Tuesday. So.
Right.
And that also means it will likely be a shorter turnaround between next episode and the episode after that.
Right.
And then the following week will be, as discussed, which I did not update the schedule, shame on me, but as discussed last week, we are changing and flipping those two dates. Will be our look at the 2 Seventh Doctor stories. We'll be doing the Titan Comics, is it Operation Volcano?
Yes.
And then the Big Finish 109-ish, somewhere in there.
109-ish.
109-ish.
Good old 109-ish.
Just look it up. It's one of those. And so we'll be doing that with it.
Very good. All right. Well, is there anything else you guys want to add before we close this show out?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, if that's going to do it for this time, until next time, I'm Glenn.
I'm Sean.
I'm Keith.
Cheers.
Good night, everybody.
Be seeing you.
Thanks for listening. Merry Christmas.
You have been listening to Traveling the Vortex. Doctor Who and all of its associated programs are owned and trademarked by the BBC. No infringement is intended or implied.